Good morning and welcome to the Haven Financial Group radio show. I'm Larry Kallevig, founder and CEO of the Haven Financial Group, and we appreciate you listening. If anything resonates with you, if you have questions at any time, feel free to give us a call, 612-504-8400, or visit us online at havenfinancialgroup.com. Kim, good to be with you again today. A lot happening in this world, all over the world, and people are still retiring. Imagine that.
Well, we certainly hope so. We hope that the world's events have not stopped people from their plans. Unfortunately, I bet there are a few people out there that they have. But for the majority of people, they are trying to stay on track. And I think we've said this so many times on so many Sundays, Larry, and that is, you have people who come in and they sit down with you and they say, my biggest fear is I don't have enough money or my money's going to run out. So today we're going to talk about staying retired. You know, it's one thing to make a plan and just about get there, and it's another thing to stay there and not have to maybe come out of retirement because you've maybe miscalculated in some way, or something has happened in your life that has changed your circumstances. We're going to talk about full retirement income plans, living a fulfilling life, and being financially confident, which is so important, having an emergency fund and the ability to replenish it. And then finally, we'll close out with pitfalls to avoid after you retire. How frequently do people come in, ask you if they have enough money, and you have to say, I don't think you do?
It happens more often than you might think, but it actually happens both ways. Folks that come in and they think they're not well positioned, and they are well positioned because they've never really sat down with anybody to have a talk. And then the others that are overconfident that they're just in just this great place, and it's like, based on the numbers, you're not in a good spot, and I'm not sure how you think you're going to retire. So, you know, we say that, with sleight of tongue to the degree that we want to be respectful, but we have to have tough conversations because it doesn't do any good for us to sugarcoat things and make them sound better than they are. You know, that's a complete waste of time. And you said it, it's one thing to retire, but staying retired. And when the people think of retirement, money is probably the first thing they think of. But it's more than just money. It's what supports your freedoms, your choices, your peace of mind. So having that plan has a lot of positives to it. And therefore, how about we start with a plan, because a lot of folks don't have one. Their plan is hope. And we like to have hope, but hope is not a plan. So we might want to dive a little bit deeper, and I think we're going to touch on this during today's show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get started with this, having a plan. I mean, Larry, you have said so many times, and I understand exactly what you mean, just listening to you back up the statement. You must have a plan in order to live a fulfilled retirement. For some people who are listening, maybe they're wondering, what's a plan? My plan is that I'm going to stop working and I've saved money and I'm going to go on with my life.
Well, that sounds good, but there's more to it than that, because how often all those years of putting money away, and I hope you did, because that's going to prepare you for a successful retirement. But now you're having to draw on those funds that you've been putting into all those years. How many times have you done that over the course of your career? Hopefully not many, because then you won't have much for retirement dollars. So we want to be tax efficient. So, I'll just start, by telling the listeners at Haven Financial Group, when folks meet us, they're referred to us, they come to our classes, which I'll probably touch on in today's show, a variety of classes. And if they choose to come in, and listeners can have this opportunity as well, we'll sit down with them and have a discovery meeting to get to know them, ask questions. I mean, questions you've probably never been asked before, detailed questions about their life, family, aspirations, goals, etc. From there, we'll sit down and, if they so choose, and come up with a strategy, a plan. And when we're talking retirement, it's not just the money. It's, the health care, the Medicare, the long-term care, the life insurance, wealth management, all of those retirement puzzle pieces. Then we'll come up with an implementation process. If they go, wow, I've never ever taken it this far, I probably should dig deeper. I probably should know if I'm going to run out at 95, 75, or never. And then when we put this plan in place, then we have monitoring and adjusting. We get older, life happens, and it's not a plan you just put it on the shelf and then you don't revisit it. This is something that we need to revisit more often than not. You mentioned at the beginning, People are retiring. The stock market's been very jittery for war reasons and others. And people, I have heard, oh my goodness, I planned on retiring here this month or next month, and I might have to delay it because the market's not cooperating.
Right.
I hope that isn't the case. But if you don't have a plan that you've talked through, you're just winging it. And I don't think winging it is what you really want to do to prepare for what could be 10, 20, 30 plus years.
No, absolutely. In fact, I can't even imagine winging it because, I mean, you didn't wing it in those first years. You probably got an education and you made a plan and you went after some kind of career and some kind of lifestyle. So you certainly wouldn't want to wing it in the second half of your life. One of the things that I know is important is this idea of income, steady income. You've adjusted to the idea of having steady income all your life, and then suddenly it stops. And while maybe you've been a good saver and maybe you've got all kinds of sources for your income, where do you start? How do you start to draw that money? I think that's a really tough question to be answered for a lot of people.
It's why it's important to have options. And I mentioned that there are different types of money. Your pre-tax money, which you put in your IRAs or 401ks, the Roth IRAs also that you've contributed to in those type of accounts, and then non-qualified after-tax money. Having options gives you the freedom to draw in the most tax-efficient way possible. And, we've talked over the years about mailbox money, your Social Security, your pensions, if you're fortunate to have, or, like my wife and I, we will not have pensions. So how do we create our own pension? Where is that income going to come from? Because that's really what matters. Consistent income. Over the years, we asked new retirees, what's the hardest adjustment in retiring? Overwhelmingly, the answer is not getting a paycheck anymore, which makes perfect sense. So
Sure.
Now how do we create a paycheck? At Haven, we send out to our retirees literally millions of dollars the 1st and 15th of every month, or whenever they so choose to turn it on. We withhold taxes, because that income will give you the peace of mind. It'll sustain your lifestyle, post-retirement, the travel, the hobbies, but it also will cover the basic expenses. I always say let's cover the income for what you need and then cover the wants in that order, preferably. And then you have healthcare. Regular income assists you with managing and covering healthcare costs, for sure. Factoring in inflation. Of course, over the last several years, we've had this pretty much every week we're on together. And planning for the long run, longevity risk is real, and not for married couples, for both of you, not just one of you, because that remaining spouse probably wants to have a lifestyle no different than if you were here. And I probably preach this too much, but having an emergency fund, liquidity is important. Being able to keep up with your emergency fund, and we'll talk more about that later in the show, just to give you a kind of a safety net. And I can tell you, I can assure you, because of years of experience, most are not well positioned in this category. And I think it's so very important as you approach retirement to have good, liquid, tangible cash you can get your hands on quickly.
Well, as you've said so many times, life doesn't always go the way you plan it, and emergencies do come up, and you need that ability to get your hands on money.
It does. It does. And you know what? When the markets are down, you don't want to tap into those accounts. If you can draw off some liquid funds, having those options is so important. And then the flip side to saving is managing debt. Unfortunately, in the last few years, people have racked up some credit card debt. Interest rates are over the top. And that is a hole that for some is really tough to get out of. 20-some% interest rates. That's going to damage retirement real quickly. And money, there's a lot of psychology behind it. Having a steady income, knowing where it's going to come from in the most tax efficient way, it'll make you feel better. You'll probably sleep better. There'll be more peace of mind. The stress and uncertainty hopefully is not there. And doesn't that sound like a much more peaceful retirement than worrying about money every single day? Unfortunately, we come across those that worry about money every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think any of us wants to sign up for retirement like that. So we're talking about income planning in retirement, and it's just one of the pieces to the puzzle that we're putting together today, talking about how to stay retired. It's one thing to retire, it's another to stay retired. If any of this rings a bell for you, be sure you give the folks at Haven Financial Group a call. 612-504-8400 is the number. Let them know that you heard us here on the radio and you'd like to come in for a free consultation, sit down and talk about some of your desires when it comes to your retirement, and talk about planning and how you can go about planning the perfect retirement that you can stay in. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about living a fulfilling life with financial confidence, an important puzzle piece to being retired. You're listening to the Haven Financial Group Radio Show.